Hi, everybody. Yes, it's 10:33 on Friday night, and I'm just thinking about you guys and trying to figure out how to streamline this process of creating color maps and transparency maps for view. Basically, the techniques I showed you the other day work, but I know a lot of you are running into this issue of having kind of this white edging or fringe around what you were doing. And the reason for that is, I think, as I explained to most of you, is that when you're working in RGB, every time you cut or fill with a selection, it's always Photoshop's always trying to dither those edges out so there's a smooth transition. Unfortunately, that doesn't really help us when we're dealing with transparency maps because what we really want to do is have black or white and nothing in between. And one of the things I've discovered is that sometimes when you even if you use curves and change the color image to black and white, it looks like they're shades of gray, but in reality, they're actually semi-transparent pixels in the image, and that's where the problem comes in because no matter how many times you select and fill, because it is dithering that in RGB mode, you can never get rid of those pixels. Well, you can't never get rid of them because after about 6 hours of working on this, I think I figured out a good process. So I've typed up some instructions both for creating the color maps and the transparency maps, but I thought I'd do a little demo for you to show you how that works. And hopefully you can look at the written instructions and look at this demo and let me know if there's anything that's inconsistent. So um, I'm not going to go through the process of making the color map, which is the image that you see on the screen here, basically the leaves themselves. I think that's pretty straightforward. You basically find a leaf that you want, you set up a document. I suggest either from 512 by 512 to 1024 by 1024. If you want really high resolution, go with a big one. If you want lower resolution, more middle ground background plants, you can go lower. And if you look at the layers over here, when I originally did this one, because nothing overlapped, they were on one layer, but I split them up just because I know some of you were, I suggested that you use separate layers if you're laying this out, which I think is a good idea. So the first thing you want to do when you start your document though is create a layer group. And if you look here, this is basically in my instructions, I say the plant species underscore C, or tell you the truth, it might be a little clearer. I think I put in my directions. We'll call that color. Okay, so that represents the color map. But you also notice that what I did was put a .jpg on the end. And I'll come back to this later on. But basically, if you use this method, it allows Photoshop to automatically generate the files that you need. You don't have to do save for web. You don't have to do save as. Every time you make a change, it automatically generates the assets that you need. And I'll talk about that in a minute. So first thing you do is create one folder for the color map, and then we're going to create another folder or layer group for the transparency map. So again, it's the species. This is an oak leaf hydrangea. So whatever you want to call it, I'd use hyphenate or underscore between the names just to make sure there's not an issue with file names. And then the last is color. This is the color map. That's the image itself, .jpg for JPEG file. Okay, and within that, you can create as many layers as you want and have all this information here. So once you've got your leaves on multiple layers, and then I have a branching layer, you've got all this done. You guys have already done this. What I would do is select all this except the white background. The white background is helpful and we need that, but for what I'm doing right now, we're going to create a composite layer that's going to sit at the top of this. So select all those layers except the white layer, do Control Alt E, and let's just name that color map. I think that's what I called it in the written instructions. Okay, so this is essentially a composite of everything under here except the white. So this is covering up everything. All right, so let's close that up a second. Now let's talk about the transparency map because that's the one thing that's a little more complicated as it turns out. So I'm going to create a new layer group and I'm going to name this the same, oak leaf underscore hydrangea underscore trans for transparency dot JPG. again, we'll see, I'll show you how that works in a little bit. So I'm going to open this back up. I've got my empty folder and it's named to create the file asset that I need. And now what I need to do for this is I'm going to take, in this case, a composite of everything. So I'll close this up, select that, and do the same thing. Control, Alt, E. And that creates a composite of everything, including the white background, which for this is important. So I'm going to drag that and drop that into my folder. Okay, so you can see that file is in my folder. Now I'm going to select that layer and I'm going to open my other layer group so I have access to these files. So the first thing I want to do is go to the image menu and adjustments and threshold. And this turns out to be a better method of turning this into a black and white file than using the curves. So I'm going to type in 255 and that basically shifts everything to black. And what you'll notice is you see all these little dots and stray pixels on the screen. Those are all the little semi-transparent pixels that you couldn't really see, but that's what was giving you the fringe and these other dots and spaces in your transparency map, which we don't want. So how do I get rid of those? Well, the first thing I'm going to do then is come back down here to my color map layer. And in order to, you can actually load a selection based on what's in here. And the interesting thing is that Photoshop kind of ignores pixels that are less than 50% transparent. So even though the color map layer has semi-transparent pixels, if I hold the control key down and click on it, it's going to give me a selection that represents more of the solid pixels, and it's going to ignore the ones that are kind of lightly transparent. So if I turn my quick mask on, you can see that's giving me a selection. And if I zoom in a bit, there's that little fringe around the edge that we're trying to get rid of. So you can see it didn't actually select that. So what I'm going to do to get rid of it, in regular selection mode, I'm going to go to Select and Inverse. And then I'm going to go to the Edit menu and choose Fill and fill it with white. And you'll notice when I zoom back in that those pixels are not there anymore. It just filled them all in. Now if I deselect that and keep zooming, you can still see that I have some kind of gray pixels, and those are the pixels that represent kind of the semi-transparent or lighter ones. So in order to eliminate those, the next step is to go to Image, Adjustments, and Posterize. And we did this the other day, so this is just the right sequence to do it in. Now when I zoom in, you can see that those gray pixels are all completely gone. There's nothing there. And if I turn this off and back on, you look that you can see, watch this edge right in here. It's going to give me a transparency map that will eliminate that white fringe around the edge of it. So that's a sequence of steps. And since so I'll just have one layer in here with the white background, but now it's black and white, and that's exactly what I want. If you look around in here and you see any kind of gray pixels, then you didn't do something right, because you really should just have black and white. That's the most efficient way to create the transparency map. So with that done, I can close these up. And then what you want to do is go to the File menu, and you'll notice that there's something called Generate. And this is a new feature in Photoshop CC, that you can have it generate assets based on names that you give either layers or layer groups. And in this case, I've used layer groups because I have a bunch of stuff in there, but I know what's visible in each one. So I've already have it checked. If it's not checked, you just choose this, click on it, it checks it. And as I save this image, I just hit Control S to save it. I can go back to, let me back up here one folder. So the oak leaf hydrangea image, it's right here, this template image, it's in this folder. When I have generate assets, it creates a whole nother folder, which is great because it keeps everything organized. When you go to put this into view, you know exactly where to find it. You double click on this. I think this error has to do with a naming or something. So if you get that, I wouldn't worry about it. It's not an issue. So there's a JPEG that represents the color map, and there's a JPEG that represents the transparency map. So if I launch view, and I also had some issues with this today, and I'm not sure, I'm still kind of figuring this out. I'm going to load the summer bush in here. zoom in, click on it, edit object. And I think the first thing I would do is to go ahead and save a plant species. And I'll just call this oak. Oak leaf hydrangea new, just to separate it. Okay, so it's just saving in my bushes folder, get that done. And now I'm going to click on this. And one of the things I noticed today also is I was kind of going through this really quick, trying to go through several revisions. And I think I was actually clicking through it too fast. And before it could update it, it was closing and then it wasn't picking the changes. And I end up with duplicate files. So the first thing I'm going to do is click delete both of those and double click. I'm going to navigate to leaves. There's my assets. I'm going to load in the oak leaf hydrangea, move my hooking point to right there, load in that. And you can see there is a little bit of fringe, but I think as you'll see, it's not really an issue. It's going to look nice and clean. So if it's that tiny, then I wouldn't worry about it. Partly, I think part of that is kind of that there's a bump map associated with it. Okay, then the next thing I'm going to do is edit material, right click on this and choose edit function. So one of the things you'll notice, and this is, I don't know why this is staying in here, and this has been part of the problem for some of you. You saw kind of a poorly distributed image because it actually has this image. It has the transparency map, and then it still has some original map in there. So I'm going to select that and delete it. Click OK. And actually the other thing you can do, right now this projected image, the color map is going to, the color output is to color, so it looks like a leaf. The output is to alpha, and I can actually delete that because I don't need that. And I can take the grayscale output and put that to bump. So it basically uses the shades of gray in that image to create like where the veins are, bumps in the leaves. And then this grayscale output goes to transparency. So that, otherwise, if this goes to alpha, that's kind of an overall transparency, so the leaves will look transparent. We don't want the leaves to be transparent. It's too much calculation, and it's not, even though they are a little translucent, we don't really want to reproduce that for what we're doing. So I'm going to click OK here. Give it a little time. Click OK. And this is where I think I was clicking through this a little too fast, so just give it a chance to update. Click OK. And let's see what we have here. Not too bad. I'm going to go to final. And let's click it again. Now, I haven't gone through and fixed the atmosphere settings, so I think there is a little overexposure here because I think it's on the photometric spectral. But if you look over on the right side, you can see that the leaves look pretty good, and I think this is just overexposure here. It's not a mapping problem, and you don't see that white fringe around the edge of it. If I go to atmosphere editor, yeah, it's on photospectral. Go to standard. Let's go in here. It always drops the altitude of the sky down a little bit too low. So I'm going to set that up. You can see in the preview that looks a little bit better. Light, a little more sunlight, a little more sunlight. Click that. Let's render it. So you can already see, I think that that's probably fixed a little bit of the problem. It's a little less bright there. Still a little overexposed, but at any rate, what I really want you to look at is the fact that these leaves don't really have that white fringe around them at all, and everything looks pretty good. So that's the method for setting it up in Photoshop. I will be posting the written instructions so you can read through that, and then if you watch this video, go through it a couple times. It's once you get the sequence, it works every time. You get nice, clean transparency maps, and that's something that, as we talk about materials next week, it's going to be a little bit more helpful. So anyway, I hope that helps. Sorry I didn't have that the other day, but I'm sure it's not the last time. I'll figure out a better way to do something before the semester's over. All right, see you Monday.